Would you be surprised if I told you this is footage of the American Southwest?
Hello! Well, I have gotten out of my growing zone, and today I wanted to show you some useful plants of the American Southwest. It's nice to get out into a different setting once in a while, and I'm in the beautiful forest of Arizona, which is originally where I'm from. And I think a lot of people, probably many of you, when you think of Arizona, you think of dry climates, hot, and lots of cacti. And while that is true in many parts, I really wanted to show you today some of the forested areas because that's lesser known and there's still a lot of really great plants. And especially the Native Americans, because they were here for so long, way before us, that they really learned how to utilize these plants fully and effectively. So I thought it'd be cool if I just kind of took you around and showed you a few of them today. And I also wanted to show you the skylight because, wow, amazing. Anyway, it's a really cool room. But enough indoor activity. Let's go outside and I'll show you around. Welcome to True Freedom Permaculture, where I show you all the tips and tricks you need to have a green thumb, even if you weren't born with one. All right, so first up we have the gray oak. Now, flip this around, there are many types of oak trees. And if you're anything like me, you might associate oak trees with more of those curvy, larger leaves. So I was actually surprised the first time that I learned that this was an oak tree as well. And I'm going to zoom in so you have some closer footage. But what you'll see here is you'll see these leaves and they have more of like a blue greenish color to them. And they are also slightly toothed. Toothed? How do you say that? Someone tell me. Teeth or tooth, one of the two. And the leaves are much smaller than other oak trees, like English oak trees, for example. And you can also see the bark on the tree. It has this like scaled bark. Another thing to note about these oak trees is that they tend to be smaller than other varieties of oaks. And they have overall this kind of like rounded, mounded shape to them. Now these acorns aren't ready yet. You can see they're still green. They'll turn brown and they'll actually fall to the ground when they're ready to be harvested. And besides little critters loving them, the Native Americans used them quite a bit in cooking. And this was really important because they could grind these acorns into flour. It's quite a process, especially when you compare it to today's modern conveniences. But for them, it was really important to have a food source that they could store over the winter when other things weren't growing. So to have that reliable food source, and I think I saw that acorns fully intact like this will store for something like 5 years. So it was really nice to have that stable constant, knowing that you would have something to eat even if times were tough. So let's see if I can find some fallen acorns for you. Yep, so here's one. You can see the change in color from the green ones that I showed you earlier. So yeah, these have a lot of tannic acid in them, so they're quite bitter, and if you ingest too much of it, it's not very good for you. But tannins, the same sort of concept when you think of wine, it has that kind of like bitter, astringent, drying effect in your mouth. So it's not necessarily something that you want to eat when you are eating bread. For wine it provides an element of interest, but when you're just having some porridge or something, it's not the most desirable. So they basically have to leach the tannins out of the acorns, and they would do that usually through like a cold water process, but there's I think at least 2 different ways that you can do it. And then they would dry it and grind them into flour, the meat on the inside of the acorn. And yeah, they would make porridges out of it, they would make breads out of them. And the flour from these little acorns actually has a lower glycemic index than that of white flour. So really healthy for you and didn't spike the blood sugar as much.
Now let's move on to the ponderosa pine. These evergreen trees, on average, reach maturity at 165 feet tall and at the age of 300 to 400 years old.
So ponderosa pine, and its Latin name is very similar, Ponderosa means heavy in Spanish, and it gets its name because these pine trees just get so massive that is why they called them heavy. One of the first ways to identify ponderosa pine is by its distinctive bark. And you can see as the trees mature, they turn this like reddish orange color. And it's like this burnt orange red color. And in between, you see the black crevices. And that is distinct to the ponderosa pine. And these scales or plates that cover the trunk of the tree have these wavy lines to them. And it's really amazing. Now, they also say that the tree bark smells like vanilla. Accurate. Now, ponderosa pines are typically found in the western part of the US. And when you compare it with pines that you more see on the East Coast, you can see how different the pine needles are compared to one another. So quite different. And another marker of the ponderosa pine is they say, if you can see, it has these like nodules on it. And out of each little nodule, they say that there can be in between 2 to 5 needles, but typically it's 3. So when you see clusters of 3 long needles like that growing out of each little nodule, you'll know that it's a ponderosa pine. Now the needles of this tree can get quite large. For scale. Now the Native Americans had a multitude of uses for this tree. They would actually eat the inner bark, not the outside scaly part, but it gets much more tender on the inside, so they would eat that. They would eat the seeds that came from the pine cones of this tree, and they would also boil the pine needles into a tonic, and they would drink that in order to heal coughs, so it would essentially be like a cough suppressant.
The trees were made into lumber, which was used for furniture making, and it still is today. From the resin, you can make something called pine pitch. And some people use pine tar and pine pitch interchangeably, but pine pitch is actually much thicker.
And they would use this viscous pine derivative to waterproof their canoes. They would put it on various types of wounds. So yet another way that they would use this tree. What's this pop of color that I spy over here? Let's take a closer look at it. All right, so these are showy golden eyes, and they are native wildflowers found in the Southwest. And you can also, I think, find them in like Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, that part as well. And they're identified, they're part of the aster family, and they look kind of like if a sunflower and a daisy had a baby. That is what this would look like. And these petals are actually flowers. They're ray flowers here. And you can identify it by these slender alternating leaves too. It's said that some Native Americans actually ate the seeds from these plants, which I imagine are really small and are kind of like poppy seeds. These are great pollinator plants, so insects are really attracted to them. They provide a nice pop of color, and they will bloom all summer long. So here's another member of the aster family, and this is called three-nerve goldenrod, in reference to the 3 veins that run along the entirety of each leaf. And it's composed of a bunch of little flowers, which you'll see here. Now this goldenrod was used by the Native Americans to treat urinary tract infections, infections of the kidney, and also skin ailments as well. And it was used both topically and internally. They made a decoction out of it, and also they would use it as a dye to create, of course, a golden dye. It's great for healing allergies as well, and these flowers will bloom all summer long and into the fall. So for all of you Spanish speakers out there, you will already have a clue as to why this plant behind me gets its name. This is the manzanita plant, and manzana means apple, and when you add the ita suffix, it means little apple. And indeed, the berries from this plant do resemble small apples. And the berries are used to make ciders or jellies, and you can even bake with them too. I think I heard someone made a sugar out of it as well. And this is also another plant like the goldenrod, which is really great for urinary tract infections and infections of the kidney. And it's also used to heal a variety of skin ailments. And you can identify it because it has these kind of oval-shaped leaves along with this beautiful burnt red bark.
Now, the Native Americans would harvest the leaves and they would use it as a tobacco additive or substitute. I thought you all might like to see how it all comes together to create this beautiful forested landscape, and you can see the different layers of all the plants. Take a look at the floor too, so you have some naturally fallen logs and sticks, and here's the goldenrod too. You'll even see some fungi as well, which we know is also an essential part of a working environment. And look how all the pine cones and pine needles have come together to create a mulch for this forest floor.
So I hope this gave you a different view of Arizona and you saw some different things that you might not have expected to see. And I hope you learned a little something along the way too. If you enjoyed this video, I have other foraging tours that I did in different climates. So if you're interested in checking one of those out, I will put it up on the screen now. You can click on it and I'll meet you over there. I'll see you again soon.